Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So today is Friday, the 4th of November. Happy Friday to everybody. Here in Rapid City, South Dakota. Just backed into a dock, brought a load of beer out here. So couple of housekeeping things. Tomorrow, so let me back up. Yesterday, November 3rd, was National Sandwich Day. And as you may know, a gentleman by the name of Montague, who's known as the Earl of Sandwich, is the guy who kind of invented the sandwich. Purportedly, he just asked for some slices of beef between two pieces of bread so he didn't have to stop playing cards. And that's what kind of gave us the... I slightly changed the angle of the camera so I wouldn't get glare. But so Sandwich orders this from one of his servants, and they bring it to him, and so he didn't have to stop what he was doing to eat while playing cards. So that was the invention of the sandwich. And it just so happened that yesterday it came up on my feed, Warren Zevon's final appearance on the Late Show with David Letterman. And if you know anything about Letterman or Warren Zevon, you know that they were kind of friends, and Letterman did a lot to help promote Zevon's music. Like, he was put him on TV a lot. And the thing was, Warren Zevon was a huge star, but I think the Letterman show exposed his music to a lot of people that would have otherwise maybe not seen it. And the occasion of his final appearance is that he had been diagnosed with terminal metastasized lung cancer. And so the entire show was dedicated to Warren Zevon. And one of the things that Warren said was, kind of talking about the philosophy of life was enjoy every sandwich. So I just thought it was kind of apropos that I just happened to watch that video on National Sandwich Day. So, he said it a couple times during the show, enjoy every sandwich. And it's kind of a metaphor for appreciating your time on earth and being grateful for what you have and stuff. So anyway, thought I'd share that with you. A belated happy National Sandwich Day to everybody. And then tomorrow, November 5th, is the 42nd anniversary of an important date in U.S. naval history. And it's an important date in U.S. naval history because that's the day I went to boot camp. Yeah, November 5th, 1980. Wow, that seems like a long time ago. I got off the bus at Recruit Training Command in Great Lakes, Illinois. And, the rest, as they say, is history. So, anyway, with that stuff done, I wanted to talk today about both something that's happened a couple of times since I've been a trainer at Prime, and kind of like what I hope people think about when embarking on a career in trucking. So let me start at the beginning, if you will. Last year around this time, I had a trainee on my truck who was going to do PSD. And you may recall that he went out on the road with me. And so we had, we'd been out a few days. We left Springfield and headed west. And, I'd let him drive a couple of times. And after the second time, it wasn't immediately after, but I drove, and then we stopped for the night. And and the next day, he told me that he didn't feel comfortable driving. So, he just had his permit and stuff, but, I hadn't done anything crazy with him. I just taught him to straight back a little bit on the pad before we left, and I had him do some backing, but nothing like it was big open spaces. And then I had him drive on I-80 in Nebraska, which is about as, notwithstanding that there's a lot of traffic out there that's moving at a high speed, it's pretty benign in that it's a straight interstate for miles and miles and miles. The weather wasn't bad. He drove during the day, and then the second time he just drove for a short period of time because I needed a half an hour break, but we were going to make a delivery. So I got on break, and then I just let him drive basically a few miles. It was in Utah, but it was very manageable, downhill into a town basically, and into a parking lot essentially. So anyway, he just decided, and I could tell he was nervous, but I don't really get super concerned when a new driver's nervous, simply because that's to be expected. But he was just feeling too much anxiety when he was driving. So fast forward to the past 2-3 weeks, and I had a TNT student on the truck. I picked him up at home, and we just started working our magic, and did a few back and forths. But let me see. I was home. I got home last Friday, so we made a delivery in Pennsylvania early last Friday. But the day before that, actually just a few hours probably before that, he had told me that he was just too nervous, and he was really worried that he was going to hurt somebody driving the truck. Now, this is a little bit of a different scenario because this guy already had a CDL, and candidly, he's a good driver. He didn't do anything crazy or stupid. The first time, I think one of the first shifts he drove, he had to park us at a Flying J in Iowa, and his backing was, I'll say his backing was good for it being his first time. Heck, maybe I would consider it excellent for his first time, because he needed very little help. I got out and watched, but I was basically yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, bring it back. You got the truck where it needs to be to not hit the truck on either side. So yeah, I was I felt like he was ahead of the curve in that regard. And other than some coaching along the way, and he had a tougher backing situation at one Walmart where it was uncharacteristically chaotic, I'll say. I hadn't seen that in a while, or maybe ever. In fact, I told him, I said, I think this was the most chaotic scene at a Walmart that I had experienced. But anyway, he got it into the dock and overheated the clutch a little bit, which we've all done. And again, it was just coaching. It was hey, when you pull up all as far as you can go to get yourself in a superior position to maneuver backing up, and don't worry about what people are thinking, and just you work your magic and do your job, and everybody else can wait because you waited for them. And the same thing, I coached him on some downhill stuff. I'm hey, you you crested, and this was in West Virginia, so it's not easy to handle hills in West Virginia sometimes. I said, hey, you crested that hill at a little bit higher speed than maybe you should have. And so, and what was happening is we were catching another truck going downhill. And I was like, you got to look at the trend. You got to, take action and give the truck a chance to catch itself and react. Just like when you're backing, I try to teach people, hey, don't look at where the truck is necessarily, look at where you want it to be and anticipate where the truck's going based on the input you've already given it. Because I feel like a lot of people oversteer, overcorrect when they're backing because they don't give the truck a chance to use the input that you've already given it. So anyway, long story short, I felt like he was doing a good job. I had no concerns about, at that stage in training with any of his driving, and he didn't have bad habits or anything. So like I said, not anything to, that I was concerned about or worried about. But he said it just bothered him a lot to be in construction zones. It bothered him a lot to be around other cars. Having people, act like they do, cut in front of him and take the exit, or, and he was just a ball of nerves. And so we stopped at a rest area in Pennsylvania on the way to that delivery I was talking about last Friday morning. And I was going to take over and just get us to the 90. And we had a little bit of time to kill, so that's why we stopped. And he got out of the truck and he was like, hey, I'm going to walk around the service area. And he was out of the truck, and I just had this feeling that when he came back, he was going to tell me he was done. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So I had home time planned the next day, so he came to my house with me, and he didn't go to the Navy game with us, but he was invited, and he just hung out with B, and or actually, I think she just went and slept on a bed upstairs, and he just hung out. He availed himself of the foodie scene in my town, and then we got back on the road, and I took this trip to basically finish getting him back home. Because normally, I said the other day, you kind of got to take what's coming to you, and I still believe that, although I'm probably wouldn't have taken a load of beer out of St. Louis to Rapid City normally when I was already in Edwardsville, Illinois, but I couldn't, I had to have a single load. Now, let me say this. In both instances, when I've had drivers say they were anxious, nervous, scared, whatever term you want to use about driving, then that was the last, they were never going to drive the truck again. And here's why. Because, it was kind of weird, because I contacted my fleet manager, and then he spoke to the fleet manager, and then they were still like, oh, well, we're going to dispatch you as a team. And I'm like, no. I said, you got a person who said that this is scaring them, okay? This is making them really nervous. They're worried they're going to hurt somebody. You don't put that person back behind the wheel. And again, it's not because of his driving skill, but why would it's like somebody that's deathly afraid of water. You don't teach them to swim by chucking them off the 5-meter platform. It doesn't, well, okay, we did that in the Navy, but it's a little different. we didn't chuck them off. We just made them walk off. We're like, go. There's going to be a frogman down there. It'll save you if you start to drown. But you know, like not all of my kids took to water the way some of them did. One of my kids was deathly afraid. Like he was like, we were trying to do swim quals for scouts. He was bawling, you know. I was like, okay, you don't have to get in. I got him swimming lessons with somebody that was patient, and you know, they worked with him. A year later, he's on the swim team at the Y. Okay, but it's the same thing here. Somebody gets behind the wheel of one of these things, and what comes natural to one person, and by the way, this has nothing to do with it. My experience has been, it has nothing to do with background. It has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with previous work experience. It's just some people are not going to take to this, you know. And so anyway, once somebody says that, I'm not going to put them behind the wheel. And I'm kind of surprised that people at Prime that work in a building wouldn't immediately be like, okay, well then he can't drive. I'm kind of surprised at Prime when somebody says that. And we're not talking about a personality conflict, right? We're talking about a genuine fear of operating a giant motor vehicle. And I'm not sure why they think I would still be running team with somebody that has expressed those concerns and basically, rung the bell, punched out, whatever you want to say. And so, I had to explicitly tell them, hey, we're not a team, okay? I'm going to act to get this guy home. And by the way, everything I'm saying to you, he and I had a conversation about. There was nothing, there's no stigma attached to this. I've done a lot of things, right? And I haven't always been successful at everything. But I've gone through some things that were rites of passage, if you will, like tests you had to pass, whether they be physical or mental or whatever. And, not everybody made it. Not everybody got through whatever the program was that I'm talking about. It could be anything, right? And so, or it took them a little bit longer, and maybe they persevered and got through it. But my point is that not everybody's good at everything. And so I was a little mystified that they were like, oh, well, why aren't you running a team? Well, because the guy said he's afraid he's going to kill somebody. Do you really want that liability? And I think that's an issue at Prime. And I probably will take it up with the safety department. Because it's one thing to have trepidation. And this is kind of where our conversation's going right now. It's one thing to have trepidation. In fact, it would be kind of unusual to not have trepidation. Now, I didn't have a lot of trepidation coming into this, in part because I had driven big vehicles in the past, just not, as a civilian CDL holder, okay? And so while I was like, okay, I got to learn this system and this piece of equipment, I wasn't scared about like going down the road. My technique has gotten better, but I wasn't, I wasn't thinking that I was, like I didn't feel like I'd lost control. And I think that's the problem that you run into, is that with a machine this big and the weights that we carry, and by the way, this beer load was like, it was one of the heaviest I've probably had at Prime. Well, second heaviest I've had at Prime, I think, because I was well over 79 on this when I scaled out in St. Louis. But you know, feeling like you don't have control, like feeling like you're not sure if this thing is going to slow down enough, or if you're going to be able to bring it to a stop in time. That's a concern, and that it's hard to drive with that level of, I guess the word is maybe disconfidence, with that level of lack of confidence. And so, you know, but I appreciate that the two drivers that kind of opted out, that have been on my truck, were honest about it, and didn't delay it, didn't really try to like fight through it, if you will. Because like the person that you push off the 5-meter platform, you know, you could just be like, oh, just, you know, everybody's a natural swimmer, just suck it up, you know, suppress your fear. Well, that might work, or they might drown. And so I've done a lot of things in my lifetime where I've had to suppress fear, but it wasn't debilitating. You know, when I went through when I decided to become a firefighter, you know, I went through the fire academy in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. You know, there's several tests that firefighters endure in training that will usually, you know, separate people out if they're not going to be able to manage that fear. One of them is the maze, you know. The other one is climbing ladders. And we had a guy, it was kind of funny because we had a guy who had been a firefighter in Florida, and we were doing 3 stories, you know, like it's like this drill in the 3-story firefighting building where you go up to the 2nd floor in a ladder, climb in the window, go across, climb out the window, down the ladder, up a ladder to the 3rd floor, climb in the window, go across, climb out the window, go down the ladder. He got up to the 2nd floor and was like, he wouldn't climb out. And I think I don't know what happened, because he wasn't going to my department, so I don't know exactly, but you know, that was, I don't know, maybe they only fight fires in 1-story buildings in Florida or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that, but anyway. So where am I going with all this, and why am I belaboring this point? If you're coming into this job, if you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to quit being a lawyer, or I'm going to quit being an X, you know, I'm going to quit being a computer programmer, or I'm going to quit being a dog groomer, or I'm going to quit whatever and become a truck driver. Please be honest with yourself. If you really want to understand what it's like driving one of these things, go down to like Home Depot and rent the biggest straight truck they have. And, you know, they're going to charge you a few bucks, $50 or whatever, and they're going to charge you $1 a mile. And just get that truck and drive it around the busiest area you can find at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. And drive on city streets, drive in residential areas, places that look like they're too small for a truck that big. And, oh, and by the way, buy all the insurance coverages you can, okay? And these trucks often have air brakes, right? They bounce around like crazy, especially when they're empty. And they're about as wide as a semi is, you know? And you're going to have mirrors on the hood and on the sides. And you're going to have a pretty good feel for what it's like and you know, how you can handle it driving around. Turn corners, go left, go right. You know, learn a little bit about that size, that feeling of the size. And I think if you're like, yeah, that wasn't bad, then you'll probably be okay. But if you're like, holy shit, man, I almost killed like 3 people and you know, some dogs, if that if you get back and you get out of the truck and your knees are shaking and you can't, you can barely walk into the office to give them back the keys, maybe this isn't for you. Because you have to ask yourself, now how would I feel about driving that truck in the same area at night, and driving that same truck in the area at night when it's pouring down rain, and driving that same truck in that area when it's night and pouring down rain and it's fully loaded and I'm going down mountains in Pennsylvania or West Virginia, right? And there's heavy traffic. Everything complicates it. And it was kind of funny that my co-driver said, because we weren't in any super densely packed area. We were actually on I-70 in Pennsylvania, between he started driving in Ohio and we drove across 70 to get on the PA Turnpike. But that area is tight for an interstate, Jersey Wall, not short on ramps, etc., short off ramps, and it's heavily traveled, and there's some construction. Oh yeah, and drive that rental truck through some construction too while you're at it, and that just kind of pushed him over the edge. And again, I appreciate the honesty, I really do, but maybe you can save yourself some time, and save whatever company you decide to go to some time by just saying, you know what, I drove a Ryder 26-foot truck, box truck with air brakes around my hometown, around my city, and I don't ever want to have to do that again. If that's you. And by the way, I had a family member who was thinking, not my son, who's, by the way, I think he's in Pittston today upgrading, so congrats to him, but another family, actually my daughter, and she said she and her husband were like, man, maybe we could do this, right? Because they don't have kids, they just got a couple of dogs, they wanted to get out on the road and travel and stuff. And I said, oh, hey, you want to go? I got to make a delivery up in Allentown. You want to go with me? And she was like, sure. So she goes with me. And when we got back, she's like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I said, what's wrong? She goes, I can't believe how close you are to other trucks when we're in that construction zone on I-78. She goes, I thought our mirrors were going to hit. And I was like, well, sometimes I think they do. She's like, yeah, I can't do that. Or maybe find somebody that drives a truck and go with them. That was enough to make my daughter decide she didn't want to do this, right? She's like, she rode in the passenger seat. She's like, no. And there was nothing crazy that happened that day either. There wasn't, I didn't have to take any evasive action. There wasn't an accident or anything, but just riding in a normal day, she was like, nah, not gonna do it. So anyway, I share all this with you, not to dissuade anybody, but I've always been a proponent of trying to understand what you're getting into. And, there's a way to do this. And by the way, a video game doesn't work. Get an actual truck where you're controlling it, or ride with somebody in a big rig, and see what it's like. You might, like Donald Trump, he couldn't even figure out how to get out of it once he got in one. He had to have help. So, maybe you're afraid of heights or whatever. You can't get down once you get in. But, think about those things, because, this is not a job where you want to go around, cleaning out your pants every day because you're scaring yourself, and even when you're doing nothing wrong, right? Because like I said, my co-driver, he didn't have a wreck or anything. He didn't do anything crazy. It was just, he just realized it wasn't for him. So anyway, have a good Friday, have a good weekend. Saw a little snow today. The weather's nice actually out here in Rapid City, but Yeah, it's winter, baby. So be careful out there. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.